Hey friends. As you can see, I am not in my usual setting. I'm up in Santa Fe in my parents' house. And I'm here because essentially my wife and daughter had a COVID exposure, and now I have to keep my distance because I've got a big project coming up, and I cannot be compromising it by being potentially exposed. So that was kind of a development, let's call it, today. Not what I was expecting. It essentially means I kick off my trip to New York 4 days early. And so obviously, stuff is coming up around that. And I had it's been interesting to feel this effect, because I've always, since I started this post, I've always had a sense that it wasn't a journal. In other words, I'm not just cataloging what happens to me. Not that that's the only thing a journal can be, but for me, it has been a deliberate practice of putting myself in the perspective and the dimension as much as I possibly can of viewing life as a spiritual practice and observing the events of my life from that perspective. And depending on the day, that is sometimes a very kind of natural and easy thing, and other times it actually, I would say that I would oddly, or not oddly, say that it has always felt easy to do that. It doesn't take effort for me to assume that perspective. Even if I've had a day where I felt a bit embroiled in my trials and tribulations or whatever might be going on in my life, it's always been possible and generally it's felt like a natural step. It may also be getting easier because I've been doing it for so long, but the point of this is really for me to survey my life from a position of what's ultimately deeply happening on the deepest level that I can possibly perceive and articulate. I can't speak to levels that are happening that I can't perceive, but I can go as deep as I possibly can every day. And so this practice has been just so immensely valuable for so many reasons. But it's the prime reason is that it's basically, I've given myself the imperative to frame my life at least once per day. Ideally, I resonate with that perspective and I live in that perspective all the time. But I've declared that at least for one, however many minute period per day, I'm going to not just be in that perspective, but I'm going to speak from that perspective, and I'm going to evaluate what's happening to me via that perspective. And that's how, of course, I end up saying things that I never would have known. I never knew I was going to say, and it's like the insights come through me and they come out of me. They come out of me as soon as they arrive, and they come and they arrive partly because I'm allowing them through. So something like what happened today is a really interesting moment to reflect on in that way, because it was really unexpected, and I kind of didn't even clock it. It was kind of like we clocked what happened, and then it was Katie who was like, "What are you gonna do?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" "Oh, right. I should probably leave the house." and like that was not, I was expecting to have just a little more time to get Annalise prepared for me to go again. I'm leaving again for not nearly as long as last time, but a not insignificant amount of time. And I had clocked that it was coming hot on the heels of my previous trip, and so I was just preparing to kind of like settle into that transition with Katie as well, Katie and Annalise. And then all of a sudden today I realized, oh no, this is all happening in the next couple of hours. And then as I drove up here, I was listening to Sadhguru's book, and there was something that really stood out, as there always is. I mean, my God, this is a book, I'm telling you. I could listen to the same 5 minutes of it over and over again, and it would be interesting. It's just so dense and so full of beautifully expressed insight. And he said something about obviously karma. Karma is the theme of the book, title of the book. He's talking about how our past karma isn't actually the problem. The problem that most of us are wrestling with, the problem that keeps most of us in bondage, is the fact that we're in our minds, and our minds are generating more karma based on our past. Because anything that is limited, anything that is created out of limitation, will be limited. So in other words, anything that the mind creates will be limited. It will be limitation, a form of limitation. And that kind of, blew me wide open for a moment when I realized, oh, I think a lot about and I reflect on what it means to process karma, to sort of unravel karma. But I generally think of it as processing the past, processing my already existing karma. I don't always, I think I'm less conscious of the ways in which I'm currently manufacturing more simply by the kind of action that I take, the kind of thoughts that I entertain. And and where this all, I've been speaking on this post for, I think, a couple weeks now. I've really become kind of tuned in at least enough to notice the distinction between kind of behavior that feels compulsive and behavior that feels freely chosen. Feels like it's animated by my own underlying spontaneous energy. But another thing Sadhguru says in this, and it came in the chapter that I was listening to today, is everything about our life is freely chosen. Everything, every single feature of our life is freely chosen. We just don't admit that, or we're not aware of it. So we give ourselves the illusion that life is happening to us. But if we could recognize that every moment is freely chosen, then we could begin to influence those choices. We could begin to create literally out of conscious choice instead of out of unconscious choice. And something like what happened today, getting kind of plucked, what felt somewhat violently or, abruptly into a new set of circumstances. All of a sudden, I'm not going to see my daughter and my wife for the next 4 or 5 days, and then I'm not going to see them for 11 days when I go. And that, and just registering it put me into an emotional space of a kind of vulnerability and a kind of sadness. And from that place, through that slightly deeper connection, because I've been kind of cracked open, it's evident that I'm choosing this. I don't know how it's evident. I can't explain why I know that I'm choosing this. I just know I am. And that it feels daunting on some level, because, oh my God, look at the responsibility. Look at the power that I actually have. And it feels sobering in a good way, grounding and sobering in a really kind of, in a way that makes it, that has that kind of like, my feet are on the ground and I know where the ground is, because I'm not pretending to myself anymore. It gives me that sensation as well. And it immediately makes me feel silly for the moments when I'm either not allowing that in, or I'm just allowing a certain kind of pettiness, a certain kind of, the thing that becomes so clear when we really connect with the reality of we're choosing everything, is that when we're in a petty, superficial place, we're choosing to be there. We're doing it on purpose. It's not happening to us. And obviously the answer is not to judge ourselves more harshly for that. for that behavior, for those thoughts or anything. It's just to recognize that we're choosing it. Because again, if we realized how all encompassing our choice really is, we could start choosing differently. We have it puts options on the table in a different way. Something that Sadhguru said a long time ago in a video that I saw several months ago, I don't remember exactly, but he said something about how if you want to change your life on the existential level, you have to do existential things. What most of us do is we do psychological things and we expect existential results, but you can't get existential results by doing psychological things. Gotta do existential things. Full human being things. And I think what's happening in a moment like now is it becomes evident the ways in which I'm not doing that. It just becomes visible. Not that I'm judging it, not that I'm condemning it, but there's a pain there. There's a pain. There's a kind of anguish of not being in my fullest existential space. And I don't plan to turn that into regret or, mourning, but I do intend to hear that and register it, because it's telling me where my attention really wants to go. And it's nothing but choice that puts it there. So that's where I'm at today, people. Thank you. Appreciate you. Love you. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you tomorrow.